Hey, it's Charlie with CompetitiveEdgeProducts.com. In this video, I'm excited to show you the new Spruce Stove. It's the medium stove by Colorado Stoves, and this video has two parts. The first part, I'm going to unbox it, show you the features, and then cure it, which you want to do before you use it inside of a tent. And I do it on a table. Please don't do it on a table. Just set it on the ground. But the second part, we're going to show you how to use this properly in a tent and in the 12 by 16. Yes, this medium stove works in all the Kodiak stove tents, including the 10 by 10, the 12 by 12, and the 12 by 16. So let's get to it. And if you want to just see it used inside the tent, just skip ahead to about 10-11 minutes. Colorado Stove has really outdone themselves with the packaging. This is the best packaged stove I've ever seen. It has handles to make it easy for FedEx to deliver it. So first thing you'll see is the spark arrestor, which goes on top of the largest pipe, and that keeps large embers from escaping. This is the stove itself. You can see we got some packaging. There's a lot of packaging in this that I just kind of cut out. But you can burn that packaging if you want to when you cure it for the first time. But there's 5 pieces to the stovepipe. It's an 8-foot stack, and that one says number 1. You can't really see it through the camera, but they all have a number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This here's the metal grate that goes inside the stove that you burn the wood on top of. It's not a huge improvement, but there's definitely a slight improvement from this versus the last model. Not a huge change in the legs between the two models. However, these ones do have rubber feet, rubber caps, so that you don't damage your vinyl floor or your floor liner. The spark arrestor here comes flat, so it can be kind of confusing what it is in the first place if you've never used a stove, but you just squeeze it like that, and then it will fit over the 5th. I'll show you that in a bit, but it goes over number 5 at the very top outside of the tent. The newer models use the damper. That's the damper. That's you can open it and close it, and it allows oxygen or deprives it of oxygen when you close it. There's a fire poker that the newer model comes with, and it has a newer design for the rack. It's a wire rack and I'll show you this in a bit, that you can hang, socks and rags and towels or whatever from. But even, you got to be careful. That gets hot too. I did burn the towels that I was using in the demo. I mean, they got a little bit brown. So let's put on the legs. It's pretty easy. They just screw on. Some seem to screw on a little bit easier than the others, but I didn't have a problem at least getting them on. Some I could turn with one hand, and others I had to use both hands to really get it in there. And like I said, please don't try this on a table when you're curing this at home. Just do it right on concrete or something that can get really hot. I actually had to put a little bit of water between the stove and the table as I was curing it, because you want to burn them really hot when you're curing them. All right, so let's prepare this to cure. And the curing process is just burning it so hot that it gets all the oils and all the things from the manufacturing process. It burns them off. So you start with the one that says number 1 on it. The tapered part goes into the hole in the back of the stove. And Colorado Cylinder has the best stovepipe of any of the brands that I've used. It's an improvement on the last model as well. The way that they've stitched the seam and how well they fit together. So this one's labeled number 2, so I put that one on. When you're curing it, you can cure it with the entire stack if you want to, but I would at least use the 2. And you can put the spark arrestor on top if you want. You don't have to in the curing process, but that's how it goes on the number 5. That's how it goes on the number 5 section. There's different types of wood that you can use. I didn't know this when I first started using a wood stove years ago. I just thought wood is wood is wood. It's not. On the very right, that's hardwood. That burns about 40% longer than softwood. In the middle, for example, is birch, and then pine just on the left. And they all burn really well, but if you want to get a fire going quickly, you'll use the softwood like birch or pine, and then once it's established, throw some hardwood in there. So if you have to choose what type of wood to get if you're actually buying it from a store, then keep in mind that hardwood is going to burn a lot longer and the softwood's going to burn up pretty quickly, but can be advantageous when you're starting a fire. And of course, I use some type of kindling that's cut really thin. I think that's birch as well. But throw that in there. And when you're starting a fire outside, doesn't matter if you get smoke out the front. If you start your fire in the front, you're going to get some smoke pouring out the front. No big deal. Eventually, it will start to, the pipe in the back will start to suck the air through. If you're starting it in a tent, see how it's pulling all the air back. If you're starting it in a tent, it's best to kind of start the fire towards the center or even towards the back, but not all the way back, because then your heat is just going to escape through the pipe. So if that makes sense, stick it towards like the center. But you want to get this thing roaring. We want this thing really hot so that it burns off all the oils. And there's a couple ways where you can tell if it's burning hot enough. You see the change that's happening on that stovepipe right there? It's where the shine is disappearing. That's a good sign. That means we're starting to burn it hot. And you can see if you look closely how hot that stovepipe is coming off the sides too. So as time goes on, your light wood sometimes will burn hot and fast, which it's done. And this is the hardwood that burns slower. And inside the tent, you want it to burn slower. It doesn't need to be roaring. So I'm going to move this around a little bit and get the fire, stoke it a bit and get it going. So you can see the stovepipe above that it's, I don't know if it's oxidizing. I don't know what it's called, but some process is happening to that stovepipe. So you can kind of keep an eye on it. But you can also use a thermometer to see how hot it's burning. And if you pay close attention to the paint finish on it, on the actual stove itself, you'll notice that it kind of starts to lose its shine as well. I put a thermometer on the door, which is the coldest part of the stove. And I want that to get roaring hot too, but if you're using it in a thermometer inside your tent, you're going to want to put that thermometer on your stovepipe, and you're going to want to put it up high, higher than you've seen in any of my demos. Now there's a water heater / water tank that is available for these, and you can put it on either side. You can put the shelf on either side. You can get 2 water heaters, 2 water tanks. All you have to do is put the nozzle on. It does not include this plumber's tape, but you wrap it around about 5 times, and it comes with the washer and the brass nut. I did not tighten this tight enough. It warns you not to over tighten it, so I thought, okay, I'm just gonna tighten it where I think it'll be nice and tight. But look, I noticed it started to drip, so I had to give it at least another good turn with the wrench. And then it stopped. It worked perfectly. And one of the things that I really like about the water tank is that the curvature on the back of it makes it so it's not like touching at every point the stove. You just hang it on those 2 flanges there. And when I first got it, I thought, okay, this is just gonna like be a roaring boil the entire time it's in my tent, and it's not. And I have never seen it even boil. And in fact, once you have it going for an hour or so, it seems like it's the perfect temperature it's like 145 degrees, which is about what a good hot cup of cocoa or coffee would be. Okay, so you can see the yellow zone is the safe zone. We are burning right on the threshold of in the overfire zone, which is okay in the curing process. Inside a tent, we don't want to overdo it. And I'll show you that in the latter half of this video, because I do overdo it, so you can kind of see what to avoid. But I left the rags on there. See how it's kind of brown? I left the rags on that wire rack, and they were dry, to be fair. I should have got them wet, but they were dry, and they've got little light brown marks from burning, just being so close to the stove. But you don't want to put anything on that wire rack while you're curing it anyways. It was just for demonstration purposes. I kept this curing for about 45 minutes, maybe an hour. I did notice that the tabletop was starting to get hot, so I threw some water on it just to see how hot it was, and you can see it kind of eventually slowly evaporates it. So inside your your tent, definitely use a stove mat underneath it, and it'll protect your vinyl floor there. And let me show you what I was talking about with the water tank not completely touching the in all points. Like if you look closely, you can see daylight from the front and the back through most of it, which is nice because it doesn't just, it's not like you can put like a little tea kettle on the top and it will actually burn pretty fast to a roaring boil. So let me show you inside the tent, how you burn this inside the tent. This is a 12 by 16, so it's a beast. And this spruce stove, the medium size, was able to heat it just fine. We started out at 27 degrees. If you start out in something like 0 degrees, you might like the Timberline, which also works, and it's the large stove. It looks just like it, but it's about 28% bigger. So this is the next morning. It was cold. Even the water was frozen inside the tank. So I'm going to start this fire, get it going, and it was so cold, I did give in to the temptation of just chucking this thing full of wood. And you'll see here in a moment that it actually kind of made me nervous because it kept getting very hot. The magnetic thermometer read with the needle all the way as hot as it can go. Fortunately, I have a laser thermometer, and I'm going to show you how the heat is distributed in the stove. So you don't worry so much about it, but it still is important to be cautious. And so, too, you don't damage the silicone ring at the top. The silicone ring at the top of the stove jack that's literally touching that stovepipe is rated for 575 degrees. Even burning this stove at about 800, which is about the hottest I think I've ever burned it, the top of the stovepipe is cooler, and it did not exceed 575 degrees. So my silicone ring was never in danger. But I'm going to show you just so you can see the fan. The fan is the best thing you can do to distribute the heat and get efficient use of it inside your stove. So you can still see my breath. It's still cold. It's only been just a few minutes. I'm showing you the damper there. You can open it and close it. So I'm closing it all the way because you can see that the thermometer is in the over fire zone. We're almost to freezing. We're still just a little bit below freezing, which is 32 degrees, but we're getting there. Once you get to like 50 degrees, it's no longer, for me at least, miserable inside the tent, and like you can slow your burn if you want to. But notice I closed the damper all the way and the temperature is still going up. And here's the silicone ring. I did insulate it. I did wrap some fiberglass pipe insulation just to seal it, more to seal that from daylight than anything. But if you're going to seal it with something, you got to seal it with something that's, fireproof. So that's rated, that silicone ring is rated for 575 degrees, and you can see that it's burning really hot. So I get out the laser thermometer, which we can check different spots to see what's actually burning really hot. And you don't need to have one of these thermometers with you all the time. I think it's helpful to have one the first couple times that you burn, just so you can get an idea of your stove, and just so it'll actually save you money if you're purchasing your wood. See how much cooler it is at the top? It's 450-ish at the top, and then as you move down halfway, you've got 550, and then you go right to where it meets the stove, and you've got 720. 720 at the top would be bad news. So the stove's burning hotter than the pipe. Let me open this up and show you what type of fire we have in there. We're at 41 degrees, so it's definitely rising. But you'll see here, even with the damper closed, you can overdo it with adding too much fuel because that fire's still going. So what I do, if you get nervous that the pipe's getting too hot, pull everything with the fire poker over to the front. It's ideal to burn things towards the front of the stove. It keeps the stove warmer. You lose less heat through the stove pipe. But I did bring it a bit too close because the door has the baffle that's welded on the back. So, all right, so let's see where we're at. The doors has always been the coldest for me. 275 degrees or so, 250. And then our pipe has cooled down right there. It was at 700. And if you're going to use that magnetic thermometer, I would leave it right at the top, though, closer to the silicone ring, because that'll give you a better idea of that's the most important part. You don't want to damage that. So we're way below 575. So everything's going good in here. It's burning the fuel faster than it needs to, so I am absolutely wasting fuel. But that's the temptation on a cold day, is to just chuck that thing full and let her roar. And it's definitely better to start burning this slow. Even though it's cold and it's taking a little bit longer to get warm, it will still reach the nice temperature inside, and you'll have used less wood. The surface area of the back wall usually is around 100, 110 degrees for me when I'm burning this. And that's one of the reasons a lot of that heat can escape, so that fan really helps in circulating that really efficiently. And if I were to take the temperature of the back walls, they would be still closer, in the 20s. But the air in the tent will actually get warmer before everything else will. So if you were to, pick up or touch the metal part of one of those disco bed cots, it would still be really cold, just like when you get in your car and and you have your heater on, but your steering wheel's still freezing cold. You know what I mean? So burning at about 800 is not too bad, between 7 and 800. But I'm definitely a nerd when I've got this this laser temperature gun. I think it's fun to have, but like I said, you don't need it every time. Once you get above 50, you can really back things off, because it's gonna reach 70 pretty quickly. Everything, it seems like it just starts to warm up exponentially. So I like to put the fan towards the back. Just don't put the fan towards the front where it will blow into the stove. Just either perpendicular from the side. I like from the back corner towards the front. But you can see we still got a pretty good roaring fire there. And it's heating this place up pretty quickly. So let's take a look at the water tank, shall we? I'm using the fire poker because I suspect it's pretty hot. You can see some steam. Remember, this was ice a moment ago, so not boiling though. And to get this tent warm from below freezing, not below zero, but below freezing, which is 32 degrees, to a nice comfortable 70 degrees, takes about, if you're doing it right, it takes about 25-30 minutes. If you do it faster, you can do it faster, but you might burn too hot and you might waste some of the fuel. And I know I've said this a million times, but if you're burning this correctly, you're burning the stove hotter than the stovepipe. And you can burn the stovepipe a lot hotter if you throw a bunch of pine cones or something like that. Please don't do that. You're going to get a bunch of embers coming out the top of the stovepipe. Just burn nice, good, clean wood like I showed you before. And if it does get too hot, crack open these windows. That'll help cool the stovepipe. It'll bring down the temperature, of course, inside the tent, but it'll also help regulate the temperature of the stove itself. Okay, let's walk outside and let me show you the outside stovepipe. This is actually the first time I checked it, and I've already done the Timberline large demo in this using the same stovepipe, actually, because it's the same for both stoves. And I thought for sure I'd have maybe some more embers on the tent, but if you burn good wood, you don't have to, it's not really that big of a threat. I couldn't tell if those were ashes, but once you touch them and smear them around, you can obviously tell. So it's might be best just to tap them from inside the tent, and so that they fall off of the tent. But it doesn't hurt it. Doesn't hurt the tent any to have those on there. But you can see burning this for it's probably been 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 evenings of burns, and I don't have any damage to the top of the tent. No burn marks at all from embers or anything. On a previous demo that I did years ago, I used a rain cap on top of my stovepipe, and I did get a few little burn marks. It didn't do any significant damage. It was all just aesthetics, but I don't like to use the rain cap. I put the rain cap on if I'm not using it and it's going to rain really badly, just to keep the rain out. But I've been in some rainstorms and snowstorms using the stove, and it didn't affect it at all. But, you know, torrential downpours are another story that could damper things a little bit. If the temperature inside the main area of the tent gets too hot, you can open the door and the window to the add-on room, and it will raise the temperature. I've never gotten it to 70, but I've got it into the 60s where it's not too bad. But this is a big tent, 12 by 16, plus the 8 by 8 add-on room. Man, it's so nice to have a nice warm room when it's freezing outside. All right, so after about an hour, I take the temperature of what was frozen. By the way, I wouldn't let this freeze. I don't think it's good for the nozzle. It didn't do anything to this model, but we get to about 145, 150, 150, 145, 150, 155, 135 to 155 is like the average temperature of a cup of coffee from McDonald's. So it did get it nice and hot. The cup that I was using was still freezing cold though, so even though the water was warmer, the actual cup lowered the temperature a little bit too cool for my likes. And there's another video you might consider watching. This particular stove here, this is the large stove, the Timberline. The smaller stove, well, the medium stove that I just demoed before this in this video, the Spruce, works in the Kodiak 10 by 10, 12 by 12, and the 12 by 16, so all three of the stove tent models. This Timberline, though, that I demo in another video, and I'll put a link to it, if you're in like sub-zero or close to zero temperatures out there, then this stove might work better for you in the 12 by 16. Don't get me wrong, like 90% of customers can use the Spruce that you see on the right versus the Timberline you see on the left. And you don't want that Timberline, the large one, in the 10 by 10 or the 12 by 12. It's overkill. For me in North Carolina, where it rarely gets even to zero, the Spruce is perfect. But if you're in sub-zero temperatures, that Timberline might come in handy. Thanks for watching, and stay warm.